The hall smelled of polished marble and quiet cruelty, the kind that lived in places where wealth spoke softly but carried knives, and Ilara stood at the very edge of it, half hidden behind a carved pillar, her fingers curled tightly into the faded fabric of her gray dress as if holding herself, together by force alone, because today was not meant for her. It never was, not in her father's world, not in House Valamont, where beauty was currency and love was rationed like bread in a famine. The Duke of Ashbourne had arrived with his silver-crested carriage and his reputation that traveled faster than he did, a man spoken of in whispers and legends, a widower with lands stretching farther than the horizon and a gaze rumored to see, straight through deception, and Lord Valamont had only one intention, to sell what he considered his finest possession. "Take the pretty one," her father said smoothly, his voice carrying across the chamber like a practiced lie, his hand resting proudly on Seraphina's shoulder. The golden daughter, the favored bloom, dressed in silk the color of sunrise, her hair cascading in careful waves, her smile trained and perfect, while Ilara, the second daughter, the rejected one, stood unseen and uninvited, just as she had since her mother died and took all warmth with her. Ilara had learned early that silence was safer than hope, that being overlooked hurt less than being chosen and discarded, so she watched as she always did, heart steady only because it had learned to numb itself. But then something changed, something small and terrible and magnificent all at once, because the Duke did not answer immediately, and when he turned, his dark eyes did not linger on Seraphina as expected. They moved instead, slow and deliberate, scanning the room as if searching for a sound only he could hear, until they found her, until they stopped on Ilara, hidden in the shadows, and in that moment the world tilted. No one had ever looked at her like that, not with curiosity untainted by judgment, not with interest that did not measure her worth against another's beauty, and her breath caught painfully in her chest as his gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. And then he said words that cracked the room in half. "I would like to meet the other daughter." And silence fell so fast it was deafening. Lord Valamont's smile twitched, a flicker of irritation breaking through. "The other?" he echoed lightly, as though Ilara were a misremembered detail. "She is of no consequence." "Your Grace," and Ilara felt the familiar sting of dismissal. But before she could retreat further into herself, the Duke stepped forward, his boots echoing against the marble with a finality that made even her father straighten. "No consequence is often where the truth hides," the Duke said calmly, his voice low and firm, and every eye in the room turned toward her. Ilara wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to swallow her whole, but her feet betrayed her and carried her forward when summoned, her posture stiff, her head bowed in practiced humility, and as she approached, she saw it clearly, the displeasure in her father's eyes, the shock on Seraphina's face, the sudden, sharp fear that flickered beneath her sister's perfect smile, because for the first time in her life Ilara was not invisible. "Your name?" the Duke asked gently, and the gentleness alone nearly undid her. "Ilara, Your Grace," she answered, her voice barely more than a whisper, and he nodded as if that name mattered, as if it deserved to be spoken and remembered. "Look at me," he said, not unkindly, and when she lifted her gaze, expecting scrutiny, expecting disappointment, she found none, only a quiet assessment that felt strangely like respect. Lord Valamont cleared his throat sharply, forcing a laugh. "She is plain, as you can see, Duke Ashbourne, not suited for your household," and the words cut deep. But the Duke did not even glance at him. "Plain things are often the most enduring," he replied, and then turning fully toward Ilara, he said the words that would echo through her life long after this day. "I choose her," and the room erupted, not in sound, but in disbelief, in gasps swallowed and glances exchanged, in Seraphina's face draining of color and her father's expression hardening into something dangerous. Ilara thought she had misheard, thought this must be some elaborate cruelty, but the Duke extended his hand, steady and waiting, and for the first time in her life, someone was offering her a future instead of a comparison. Her father stepped forward quickly, his voice tight. "Your Grace, surely you jest. Seraphina is far more suitable." And the Duke's eyes finally hardened. "I did not ask for suitability, Lord Valamont," he said coldly. "I asked for a wife, and with that the decision was sealed." Ilara's mind spun, fear tangling with something she barely dared to name, hope, and as she placed her trembling hand in the Duke's, she felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment, every unspoken warning, because she knew this choice would not go unpunished, not by a father who valued pride above blood, not by a sister who had never been denied anything before. And as the Duke led her away, she glanced back only once, seeing the promise of vengeance in her father's eyes and the quiet, burning hatred in Seraphina's smile. And she understood then that this was not a rescue, not yet, but the beginning of a storm. If you're drawn into Ilara's journey, if you want to see how the rejected sister survives a world that never wanted her and what price the Duke will pay for choosing her, stay with this story, subscribe to the channel, because this is only the first step into a tale of power, betrayal, and a love no one saw coming.